Today we're going to talk about what's called box spread loans. This is something I recently learned about. I found them quite complicated, however, quite interesting because there are a lot of benefits to getting this type of loan. So this presentation is kind of to describe in simple terms how they actually work, and hopefully it'll be useful to someone. The first kind of a question to ask is, what is a box spread loan? And generally it's a way to get a loan at low interest rate using options trading. Now this interest rate that you can get on the loan will beat any kind of margin rate that your broker may give you. And it'll also beat most bank rates as well. So this is why they're quite interesting and they have a lot of use cases. So unless you're really versed in options trading, it can be quite confusing. I've never really done options trading in the past, so I kind of had to learn how this all worked. I'm going to try to explain it in simple terms that hopefully a layperson like me can understand. What we'll do is we'll go over what a typical contract looks like in a box spread loan, and the underlying asset we will use is what's called the SPX index. This is an S&P 500 index. Just as something to note about, it is what's called a European style option. And what this means is the execution is limited to the expiration date. This is quite important. Basically, it prevents execution of the contract before the expiration date. So let's go through an example contract. This is kind of what you will see on a box spread loan. There are basically 4 legs to it. So let's assume it is currently March 30th, 2024, and I want a $10,000 loan, and I will pay it back after 3 months. What this contract might look like is you will have the following. You will be selling a call, buying a put, buying a call, and selling a put. Now, if you've never done options trading, this will look pretty confusing. What do these lines actually mean? And so we're going to try to break it down. The first thing to understand is what is a call and what is a put. So a call is a right to buy, and a put is a right to sell. That in itself isn't too complicated, but what actually gets complicated is these rights can be bought and sold individually. So for example, you can buy a call, which means you are buying a right to buy. You can sell a call, which means you are selling a right to buy. You can buy a put, which means you're buying a right to sell. Or you can sell a put, which is selling a right to sell. It's still pretty confusing even when you write it down because of this second level of indirection. For me, the kind of easiest way to understand it is to realize there are 2 parties to this contract. There's a buyer, and then there's a seller. In this case, the seller is me. I'm selling these 4 legs as one contract. And what you can think about is, what is each side getting or losing in this transaction? Is there a loss and is there a profit? So here is the same box spread, and I've separated it into a table of what happens on my side and what happens on their side, and they being the buyer of this contract, who I'm selling to. Now the bold lines above are my side. And the reason why they're my side is because I'm buying something. I'm getting something. So that's why there are two buys here. Now, what is the other side getting? Well, the other side is getting these other lines, which are sells. In other words, I'm selling something to this other side. So I get something and they get something. So let's talk about what happens on my side. So since I'm buying a put, what that gives me is a right to sell. And so in this put, it's basically saying I have the right to sell one SPX at 5,200. Okay, hopefully that is understandable. The next line is giving me a right to buy. So I get the right to buy one SPX at 5,300. Now, if you look at these two options together, what happens is I can buy at 5,300 and I can sell at 5,200. So in other words, this is a loss. If I'm going to buy something at 5,300 and sell it at 5,200, that's a loss of 100. Okay, so not really great for my side. So let's talk about what happens on the other side, the buyer of this contract. And those are in italics above. So the first line is giving them the right to buy one SPX at 5,200. And the second italic line is giving them the right to sell one SPX at 5,300. So what they can do with this contract is they can buy at 5,200 and sell at 5,300, which means they have a profit. They can buy low and sell high. They have a profit of 100. So hopefully that makes sense what's happening in this contract. To kind of recap, my side of the contract gives me a loss, which is minus 100. The other side, I'll call it his side of the contract gives him a profit of a 100. So if you think about it from their perspective, how much would this contract be worth to that buyer? Now, if the buyer pays 100, he doesn't really make any profit, because if he's paying 100 for the cost of the contract and the profit that he can make from the contract is 100, his net is 0. So the 100 profit minus the 100 cost is 0. So from his perspective, his goal is to pay less than 100. So the lower, the better. He's going to try to go as low as possible because he's going to make the most profit in that case. Let's say, for example, he offers 98. If you look at what happens in this case, his profit now becomes 100, which is the profit he makes from the contract, the trade in the contract, minus the cost of the contract, which is 98. That's his offer. His profit now becomes 2. Now let's look at what happens on my side. On my side, my loss, which was minus 100, now I get the 98 that he is willing to give me. I add it to my minus 100. I lose 2. So my loss becomes minus 2. He gets a gain of 2. Essentially, he is giving me 98 now, and at the end of this contract, I am paying 100. So this is essentially a loan where I pay the interest up front. And that is generally how this box trade works. Now, I use these numbers like 100 and 98. When you're dealing with options, you need to multiply this by 100, so it's actually 10,000 and 9,800. And his profit becomes $200, and my loss is minus $200. There's something to keep in mind, but I just tried to keep it simple. When we look at this loan, we can think about what is the interest rate we're getting on this loan. So in this example, I get 98 now, and in 3 months I pay 100. June 21st is when this contract ends, and that's about 84 days from now. If you do this calculation, it comes out to an annual interest rate of 8.69%. If you look at Interactive Brokers right now, their margin rates are about 6.83%. So this example is not a good deal. And I just use these numbers as an example. But what if we instead of accepting 98, I accept 98.7? This is essentially our limit price in the offer. In this case, the annual interest rate becomes 5.65%. And in the current market, this is actually pretty good. And you may very well actually get a buyer at such a rate. There's a website called boxtrades.com that kind of shows the rate that you might be able to get. But essentially, by setting this limit price, you are defining what interest rate you're willing to accept. And, either the market takes it or not. You might need to make some adjustments to get a buyer of this contract. So how does the loan get paid back? So as I mentioned, when you're trading options, everything is multiplied by 100. So in our example, the loan was for $10,000, and you're getting $9,800 immediately. The cost was $200. And at the contract end date, which in the example was June 21st, 2024, $10,000 will be deducted from your account. If you don't have the funds there, it will take from your margin, probably at a very bad, high interest rate. Just to be clear, this is not free money. You need to make sure you have the funds available on the execution date. You're getting a loan. You have to pay it back. Some notes, as I mentioned, you need to multiply everything by 100. So be aware that you're possibly dealing with very large amounts of funds. Because of the way that the trade is constructed, the actual underlying price of the asset doesn't matter. The contract is allowing you to buy and sell at the fixed price that's in the contract, no matter what the underlying price is. That's a quite interesting thing about this box spread. I found that picking numbers that straddle the current price usually finds a buyer quicker than picking some numbers that are well below the price, for example. You need to really make sure you get the trade right. If you include wrong types, calls versus puts, buying versus selling them, or you use what's called non-European style options, then you're essentially screwed. Some other notes is, you get this cash immediately in your account, but there are settlement times. This is usually 1 day for options. So, you probably shouldn't transfer it out before that settlement time, because you might incur margin interest at your brokerage. You can also flip this trade where instead you become the lender. In that case, you're loaning some money and you get the interest at the end of the contract. There are some ETFs that kind of utilize this to give you a return. I think the BOXX ETF does this. There's likely some counterparty risk here. You're basically relying on that other party to uphold their side of the contract. I'd imagine it's not any worse than a bank. I've included a bunch of links that really help me understand how this thing works. There are a bunch of forum discussions and some good blog posts. I will include them in the description. So hopefully this was useful for you.